We come now to tip number 3 regarding sermon illustrations. And when you think about the number 3, if you could just kind of lay it on its side and think about a W. Now, take that W, if you will, and take the middle part of it and stick it way high in the air, much higher than the other 2 points, if you will. And think about the first top of the W on the far left. That top of the W is the setting. As you begin to tell your story that you're going to give in this illustration, a life story, maybe it's a Bible story, etc., you begin with the setting. And in this setting, it's critical, if you will, to not only lay out the setting of what's going on, but also to lay it out in such a way that the person can identify, the people that are listening, can identify with the situation that's going on. For instance, in the life of Daniel, if you will, Daniel was carried away, he and the 3 Hebrew children, as well as many other young men of that day, carried away by the Babylonians into captivity and into slavery. Now, if that's where you stop with your story, you're going to find yourself probably talking to people who are saying, okay, that's nice and interesting, and that's where it stops. However, there are some common factors in that story, if you will, that can often speak to a person's life. Daniel found himself as a young man, stripped away all of a sudden from his parental influence, and his parents were gone, no longer under their control, nobody of authority in his life holding him to moral values. And yet, as he looked around, most of his peers had already caved to the moral invalues of the day, the immorality, if you will, and in fact the people that were in charge of this place where he found himself in Babylon were people who had determined to have him turn against his God and against the Word of God that he had been raised with. And now the real test began. What will this young man do? And indeed, now you've drawn a picture that others can understand. And there comes a time in every young person's life, as well as old folks' lives, where we wind up in situations where others are not around us. What will we do in private? Then the second part of the W, the higher part, if you will, is the tension. Now the tension begins to build in this story. For Daniel, if you will, and the 3 Hebrew children, the king's servants came and told them what they had to eat and what they had to drink, and it was in violation of how they'd been raised, and was actually a part of a sacrifice to idols. And as they were looking around, they realized everybody else had caved in. All their friends, all their compatriots that had been carried off captive with them had all caved in and decided to follow this idol and idolatry of the day and follow under the pressure of the king. In fact, it very well could be that they would end up losing their lives. So now, the final part of the W, the conclusion, the solution, and how it all turns out. And now you can lay out how Daniel came up with a solution, which he presented as an appeal, which in turn saved the day, if you will, and God blessed and God met the need. And so as you lay out a story, if you will think of the 3 points of a W, or the 3, if you will, and think about the setting, the tension that then builds, and then finally the solution or the conclusion, how it all turns out. It'll help you in telling of Bible stories as well as real-life stories. Well, sermon illustrations can be a real window into life itself if well laid out. Thanks for joining me today.